Okay, Davad.
Hello.
Is that
Davide? Come on.
Davad.
No.
Who says
David?
David. Yeah, there you go.
That's
David.
Spanish.
That David.
But Davide, you're Italian. Say Davide.
I don't think
Davide is a,
Davide. I don't think David is an Italian word.
No, but I think Davide is Italian for David.
But it isn't an Italian word.
No, but I think that's how they say it.
Aren't you Italian?
I am.
How'd you come up with David?
I didn't come up with it. My mom did. She's Italian too.
Yeah, you told me that. She's the only Italian you know that doesn't cook?
Yeah, it's an aberration. It's a crime against nature.
Crazy. How did that happen?
I don't know, but
well,
yes,
enough of that.
Let's not.
So this episode is really going to be kind of cool. It's not going to be about Italian women that don't cook. It's actually about it's about.
Let's just start over.
The whole thing?
Yeah, we're not going to keep it. We're going to keep any of that.
We could talk about your mother a little bit. What difference does it make? Here we are, beginning of season 3. Isn't it amazing?
I can't believe it.
It's really cool that we're at it again. This episode is actually going to air on Halloween. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, then you missed a know-it-all. But what does your family do for Halloween, Dave?
Okay, so we've gone back and forth with this because we know a lot of people. We're a homeschooling family. We know a lot of people who homeschool who are really sort of like not into the Halloween thing at all because they really associate a lot of like negative elements with it, perhaps even demonic and dark elements with it. And
well, it has been commercialized like that,
yes,
which is kind of a shame.
I have my own opinions about why that's become all the more focused on these days. But so anyway, so we know that there's like a group that like just doesn't do Halloween, and they'll focus on the fact of All Saints Day. And so they'll do like dress up like saints.
Right.
But I guess to us, like our kids dressing up like characters, as long as they're not, going over the top and going out and getting free candy, that neither one of those things are intrinsically evil.
No.
Right?
I don't even think even Catholic.
I know. So like in that sense, I we kind of like are really okay with the kids dressing up and the kids going out to the neighborhood and getting candy from people they know anyway from town because they've grown up in the same town their whole lives. And so it's nice the way that our town does it, because like 2 hours on Halloween from like 5 to 7 is the time that people trick or treat. So you go out, you see everybody's out.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean,
is there some of it that's over the top? Like some people, people decorate more for Halloween than they do for Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's all like death and blood and
cemeteries.
Yeah, exactly. It's over the top.
Yeah, it is.
We could probably have a whole nother podcast on this, but I think it's because people who have lost faith in God and are in a culture that's become secularized are trying to deal with the reality of death. And so this becomes like a whole thing for them in an extreme way because they don't know what to do with death.
Yeah.
But again, maybe that's too philosophical.
Yeah.
For that.
Well, I mean, Halloween has always been fun for our family. Sue, my wife, would go over the top. She would make these costumes, and she made them herself. Lauren one year was a stop sign, where it was so fun. And one year, my other daughter, Nikki, was a human hot dog, So she would make all these things. It was really cool and make dresses for them. I have great memories of Halloween in our family. I
do a lot of the corny joke ones, like the hat that has the leaf hanging off the rim and you blow it.
Right.
And you're a leaf blower.
You're a leaf blower. That's funny. Only fathers would recognize the humor in that one. But Halloween, of course, actually means All Hallows Eve, right? Which is really the night before All Hallows or All Saints Day.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's great. And many people don't even know that it's really about All Saints.
Yeah.
All those people are out on Halloween and they're really just celebrating the night before All Saints Day. Don't let the word get out. They'll cancel it.
So a little segue, Dave. Dressing up, makeup, hiding your true self. These are things that make me think about how our world thinks about beauty. As a matter of fact, our guest today is Leah Darrow, she was amazing and really great. So Dave, let's talk about beauty a bit.
Okay, so I think it's important for us to ask a question. What is beauty? What is beautiful? And really, God is. God is beauty itself. The dogmatic constitution on the Catholic faith from the First Vatican Council, that constitution is called Dei Filius, states this: the Holy Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman Church believes and acknowledges that there is one true and living God, creator and Lord of heaven and earth, almighty, eternal, immeasurable, incomprehensible, infinite in will, understanding, and every perfection.
Wow.
So God is infinite in every perfection, and one of those perfections is beauty. God isn't beautiful. God is beauty itself.
Yeah.
And now Aquinas teaches us that all creatures, all created being receives its being from God and as a participated likeness in God as supreme being. So what is this a fancy way of saying? That every perfection that is found in creatures shares in some way in that perfection in God. Okay? So if God is goodness itself, any goodness that exists in creatures is a sharing in or participation in the goodness that is God. Okay?
Yeah.
And so anything beautiful in creatures is a participation in the beauty that is God, you see? And in fact, it's the special way in which the divine perfection is imitated that constitutes the specific essence of a thing. And so, in fact, any creatures, whether they be something like trees or animals or human beings, whatever their essence is, has to do with the way in which the perfections that exist in God are manifested in that particular kind of creature. Now, why is this important? Well, obviously, there's going to be a greater amount of perfection in certain creatures than others. A prime example is that a human being has a greater perfection than an ordinary animal. Why? Because human beings are rational creatures made to the image and likeness of God. And so they share in God's perfections to a greater degree than like any other animal might, you see, or that plants might, or trees. So I think that these are important concepts to have, because something is good or true or beautiful to the degree that it shares in God's own being as goodness, as truth, as beauty, you see? And why this is important for a conversation on beauty is that in order to be beautiful, something must really imitate God, who is beauty itself. So in this sense, God is the standard for what is beautiful. God is the standard. It means that, obviously creatures are going to be beautiful in relative degrees, but anything we find that's beautiful is really beautiful because it reflects God and the being of God and the glory of God. These properties like truth, goodness, and beauty, they're called transcendentals. And while they're distinct, they're convertible. So what do I mean by this? That truth is goodness. Goodness is beauty. See? And this is important because what you realize is that in order for something to be beautiful, it's got to be true.
Yeah.
And in order for it to be beautiful, it has to be good. So goodness is beautiful. This is why holiness is the most beautiful thing. And it's also why sin is ugly.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the idea of human beauty. I mean, our world seems to be fixated on physical beauty, right? So much so that a person's value can tend to be reduced to their sexual value. Yeah. Where does this come from, and why is it so problematic?
Well, it comes from the fact that we view each other that way. It comes from original sin. So if you remember, like in the Garden of Eden, before original sin, Adam and Eve were both naked, but were not ashamed. But after they committed the original sin, their eyes were open, they realized they were naked, and they covered up their nakedness. Now, the nakedness hadn't changed. Their way of seeing one another had changed. Their way of looking had changed. So instead of seeing the person who is a body person, the person revealed, manifested in his or her body, which is how Adam and Eve saw each other with a certain purity of vision prior to sin, that when they saw the body of the other person, what they saw was the person.
The beauty.
And that's right, the beauty of their personhood manifesting itself in and through their body. They didn't just stop at the body. They saw the person. After sin, there's a reduction of the person to the body.
Interesting.
You see? And so what winds up happening is now you're no longer looking at the person as someone who ought to be loved, but now I reduce the person to an object for my use. And so what winds up happening in this regard is that instead of seeing someone's personal value, I reduce them to their sexual value. Or instead of seeing the personal beauty of the whole person, body, soul, I stop at the physical beauty, right? Because it gives me pleasure on some level. So I think that that's important to note, that eventually you could say lust that is born out of original sin is really a lack of love that ought to be present. It's a blindness to the truth of the person and their integrity and their wholeness, you see. And I think that that's ultimately why we see today the reduction of persons to their bodies, the emphasis on sexual value, and ultimately the using of one another.
Well, what about like modesty in dress? You know, I mean, how does that factor in?
Actually, it's funny. You could go back to the same story of Adam and Eve, because the shame, you could say, that makes them cover up is not a shame that is saying the body's bad, so I need to cover it. It's really a protection. In other words, Adam and Eve cover up. What parts do they cover up? They cover up the parts that they might tend to be reduced to, their sexual parts, right?
Yeah.
In order for what? To get the other to focus on my person. In order for me to protect my dignity, my personal dignity, and to almost say, I will not allow you to reduce me to an object of use. You see? Yeah. So shame actually has a positive sort of value. It helps us to recognize that we have a certain dignity that we should safeguard and protect, you know? When somebody walks into the bathroom and you just got out of the shower and you forgot to lock the door, you immediately go to cover up certain parts, don't you? Right? And the reason you do that is not because necessarily you're ashamed of your body. It's because you don't know how that person's going to look, or you don't want them to look in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's where modesty in dress comes in. What winds up happening with a modest dress is it actually contributes and fosters to a wrong way of looking and seeing. You know, it's like if you got it flaunted, well, that just teaches people to continue to look at you like an object, to continue to reduce you from your person to your body. And then you complain that people are objectifying you. I mean, like, you can't do that. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Of course, you shouldn't be objectified, but you shouldn't objectify yourself. You shouldn't contribute to a false way of seeing your person. And in this way, I think that it's not a matter of dressing modestly because the body is bad or because, you know, our sexual organs are ugly or are dirty. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that we don't look properly at one another because of the lust born in our hearts as a result of sin. And what we're doing is we're protecting our dignity. And in fact, our dress should bring people's attention to our countenance, to our personhood. We should dress in a way that highlights ourself as a person instead of distracts others from our person and brings their attention to all the parts that would just tend to have them reduce us and objectify us.
Yeah. That's great. Great reflection. Great discussion, Dave. It's awesome. I mean, the interview today with Leah Darrow is going to be great. It's going to bless a lot of people. It's really going to reveal how beautiful we are.
Praise God. Awesome.
Amen.